Hello there. Welcome to Just the Discs. We talk about Blu-rays here, and today we are talking film noir. I got a lot of catching up to do in terms of the film noir box sets from Kino Lorber. I just saw an interesting poll on their Twitter recently that was them asking if they should repackage single titles they put out previously into new box sets, and I think there was an overwhelming majority of people that were like, yes, please do that. And I think that's a neat idea. I really do think they put out some noirs that have slipped through the cracks that I think, had they been part of a box set and really, given that context, they would be even more celebrated. One that comes to mind is Joseph Pevney's Shakedown, which I've talked about on the channel before. A really great one about a photographer. It's kind of a proto Nightcrawler kind of movie. Great noir. Came out as a single, but if it was part of a box set, I think it would be one of the best of that set. It's one of my favorite discoveries of a noir in recent years. And anyway, so that's an exciting announcement. I know people will be like, well, I've already bought X or Y. That's potentially true, but I think it will allow for a spotlight on some noirs that, like I said, have just not gotten the attention despite a good release from Kino. So anyway, I'm going to go backwards through this set. We're going to start with 9, then go to 8, and then this is 14, 13, and 12 are the box sets we're looking at today. So I'll start with this, I think the latest one. This is 14. And I'll just go through the titles here. I'm going to start with my favorite in the ones I've been able to check out. This is a movie called One Way Street. And it is from 1950. And it stars James Mason and Dan Duryea. Marta Torin as well. I don't know Marta Torin, but I'm curious how they talk about it in the back here. But Menacing Mason versus Dangerous Duryea. Screen greats James Mason and stars in this south of the border film noir about a stolen fortune, a borrowed woman, and a man too many. After stealing an LA gangster's money and his girlfriend, the crooked Dr. Frank Matson, that's Mason, hides out in a small Mexican village. When the townspeople take him in, he decides to live an honest life in Mexico. But in true noir fashion, destiny awaits the doc in fatalistic Los Angeles. Co-starring Dan Duryea as the maniacal mobster and Marta Torin as his moll. They're also not mentioning one of the actors in here is William Conrad as one of his muscle guys. But yeah, it's a really interesting movie because it starts out in LA. And there's a great gimmick that James Mason uses to sort of get away from Dan Duryea with the money that I'm not going to spoil. But it's a good one, and I'm surprised I haven't seen it used before because he's a doctor and because, he has some clout in that way or some believability. There's something he does that's doctory that is pretty cool. So he ends up escaping with Marta Torin, and they've sort of become attached over time because he's just sort of like this mobster doctor that's not really happy with what's happening. And they get a plane down to this, they're going to go to Mexico City, but they end up in this small village, which they have a shaman, or I don't know if it's a witch doctor woman, medicine woman, I guess. And she, doesn't particularly like that James Mason's character showed up, but he does reluctantly at first start to offer his medical services to not only the people of the village, but also the animals of the village, which I think is adorable. But yeah, at first he's like, nah, I don't even want to, I don't even want to change out of my clothes. We're going to get out of here. We're going to go to Mexico City. And then suddenly he starts to kind of, enjoy and like this very different lifestyle. And I, can kind of relate. I feel like I get it, man. That's be kind of neat to live in this village. But then, of course, there's the specter of the money that he's taken from Dan Duryea. And Dan Duryea is definitely not nice in this movie, and definitely a guy that you can tell is not about to let anyone keep money, especially because I want to say it's like, $100,000 or $200,000. It's a lot of money. I think it's $200,000. And so he basically knows, like, I can't live in this village. I may at some point have to deal with Dan Duryea, and it becomes a thing of like, how does that go down? What are the circumstances by which that happens? Will he get caught, or is he going to, try and hope it doesn't happen? And I'm not going to give that stuff away, but I do like James Mason in this. I like him as this sort of Weasley doctor who's got, a little bit of an arc that's like, oh, maybe I could do some good here, and maybe, it's just kind of a neat noir in that way. But also just because I didn't read the back before I started, and I was like, oh, okay, this is going to be an LA noir, and suddenly it's in this Mexican village. So it's definitely that south of the border style, and it's a cool one. So anyway, that's a highlight of this set, and it includes a commentary by film historian Lee Gambin and costume historian Alyssa Rose, which I want to check out. Then we have Appointment with the Shadow, and this one is from 1957, directed by Richard Carlson, and it stars George Nader and Joanna Moore and Brian Keith. A brand new HD master from a 2K scan of the 35mm fine grain, and it doesn't say that on One Way Street. So this is going to look good. Was this the man they hunted or the killer who hunted them? Alcoholic reporter Paul Baxter, George Nader, has drowned his career in liquor. A comeback opportunity presents itself when Baxter is a bystander at the arrest of a notorious criminal, but he suddenly finds himself up against a wall and at the wrong end of a deadly setup. In Appointment with the Shadow, a compelling CinemaScope noir. Oh, that's very nice. CinemaScope black and white. Co-starring Joanna Moore and Brian Keith and Virginia Field. Helmed by Richard Carlson, director of Riders to the Stars and star of Creature from the Black Lagoon. Interesting. Co-written by suspense specialist Alec Koppel. Vertigo, Moment to Moment. Very interesting. So this one has a commentary by David Del Valle and filmmaker David Dakota. Now, when you get those two on a commentary, that usually, to me, signals there may be some camp involved in the film. And so I'm very curious how this plays out. If it's just, Paul Baxter, the George Nader character, being a flamboyant alcoholic, or if things just get really trashy, or what happens. But whenever I see them on the commentary, I'm like, okay, this could be sort of a campy cult type thing. So I'm definitely curious to check this one out. I've never seen this one before. Appointment with a Shadow. And then lastly, we have Undercover Girl. And this ties into something I'm going to talk about a little later, in that it stars Scott Brady. Now, Scott Brady, if you know Lawrence Tierney, and you look at Scott Brady, I didn't even realize this. I'm sure a lot of people knew this, but he is, of course, Lawrence Tierney's brother. And he looks a heck of a lot like Lawrence Tierney, and he also even sounds like Lawrence Tierney. But he had, I guess, the more prominent of the brothers' careers, in that, like, he's the third lead in Johnny Guitar, and he, I guess, just got a little bit more work. But, Lawrence Tierney had Dillinger. Lawrence Tierney had... Devil Thumbs a Ride and Born to Kill, and he had a lot of good stuff that I think made him stand out. But Scott Brady, because of the name change and for whatever reason, I didn't realize. But when I see him on screen immediately, I'm like, oh my gosh, that guy looks like Lawrence Tierney. So this one, there's another Scott Brady film in a later set that I enjoyed that I'll talk about later. Inside the Story of America's Daring Policewomen, NYPD cop Christine Miller, the wonderful Alexis Smith, goes undercover to investigate her father's killing in this electrically charged thriller directed by noir master Joseph Pevney, who as I mentioned, did Shakedown and Female on the Beach, which is a really good Joan Crawford movie with Jeff Chandler that I really like, that Kino put out on Blu-ray as well. Pevney is an interesting director, definitely a guy I'm coming around to. But I'm curious, because it has Scott Brady and because it's a Pevney, this is definitely one I want to check out. It also has Richard Egan. But posing as a drug buyer named Sal Willis, Christine infiltrates a narcotics ring in order to take down crooks responsible for her father's death, but blackmail, gunplay, murder, and other duplicities await her as she embarks on her most dangerous case. The sterling cast also features Scott Brady, Richard Egan, Gladys George, Edmund Ryan, Gerald Moore, Royal Dano, Connie Gilchrist, and Regis Toomey. Actually, that's a pretty strong cast. So this is from 1950. This has a commentary by writer, film historian Julie Kirgo, who I'm a huge fan of course, of Twilight Time previously, and always did a great job with her commentaries and her essays for them. Just a really knowledgeable and thoughtful film fan and essayist. So I'm even more, this one is now the top of my pile. Undercover Girl is going to be the first of the ones I haven't watched that I'm going to check out. So that is part of the Film Noir 14 box set. Now we'll take a step back to 13 and go through what we have here. We'll start with Spy Hunt with Howard Duff, who was in Shakedown, which I forgot to mention. And I do find him an interesting actor, certainly. I don't know. Howard Duff Noir is now a thing that I'm like, oh, I like Shakedown. Maybe I'll like this. So this is a brand new 2K master of this film from 1950. There's a lot of 50 in here. And this one, The Manhunt That Rocked the World, noir great Howard Duff, Johnny Stoolpigeon, which is a good one from William Castle, and that will also come up later as well. Woman in Hiding and Shakedown, these are all Kino titles they mention here. Stars with the beautiful Marta Torin, again, from One Way Street. In this compelling Cold War thriller, Steve Quain, Duff, escorting two zoo-bound Black Panthers on a train from Milan to Paris, is unaware that a secret agent, Catherine Ulvin Torin, has a concealed and incriminating microfilm in the collar of one of the animals. But when the train is derailed in the Swiss Alps and the Panthers escape, she is forced to involve him in her mission, which now includes enemy spies hunting the microfilm, the animals, Catherine and Steve. Directed by George Sherman, Larceny, The Sleeping City, The Raging Tide, from the novel Panther's Moon by Victor Canning. I guess also wrote Family Plot. Interesting. Wow, this one sounds right up my alley in some ways, like a noir involving panthers. So it's not an animal attacks movie, but it's animal attacks adjacent, just panthers with microfilm. I don't know. That sounds kind of cool to me. And Howard Duff is of the moment interesting to me. So definitely curious about Spy Hunt. This has a commentary from journalists and authors Brian Reisman and Max Every, a great duo. I've talked about them on the show before. They just really complement each other very well and do their research and give good commentary tracks. So I love, and a variety of stuff. Like they'll do, stuff from all eras. And so it's neat to see them on a noir. Very curious about that. Let's see here. Next we have The Night Runner. And this one is from 1957. Seems like 50 and 57 are really banging in terms of noir years. So this one is a brand new 2K master. Our mental patients turned loose too soon. Ray Danton stars as Roy Turner, a man with a violent past who is prematurely released from an overcrowded institution. Realizing that he cannot handle the pressures of big city life, he moves into a small town beachside motel and falls in love with Susan Mays, warmly played by Colleen Miller, the daughter of the motel's owner. When her father finds out about Roy, he threatens to have him committed unless he leaves his daughter alone. Roy snoops and commits a crime which there is no turning back from. Avner Biberman directs this black as night yet sympathetic look at mental illness. Fascinating. Yeah, I haven't seen a lot of mental illness noirs, and I don't know Ray Danton that well, but I'm intrigued by this. Certainly, this has a commentary by Lee Gamden and Dr. Eloise Ross, a Universal noir. These are almost all Universal, I think. Okay, next up we have Step Down to Terror, a very good title. This one is from 1958. Brand new 2K master. Step by step, he made a career out of love and murder based on the same source material as Alfred Hitchcock's Shadow of a Doubt. This suspense-soaked noir stars Colleen Miller, Charles Drake, and Rod Taylor. Very cool. Pursued by detectives, killer Johnny Walters, Drake leaves the city to visit his family in a small California town. Among the household, his dead brother's alluring widow Helen, who has soon attracted him, but ominous events and conflicting evidence leave Helen suspicious of her beloved brother-in-law. As director Harry Keller, the unguarded moment expertly ratchets up the tension. This has commentary by Brian Reisman and Max Every as well. So that's very cool. Step Down to Terror. I like that there's other movies based on the same source material as a famous movie. And it's always interesting to see the difference when another director, another writer, another cast takes on that material. Like, what do they choose to emphasize? How will it be different than Shadow of a Doubt? So that's a fascinating noir that I wasn't aware. Like, I didn't know there was another noir that used that same source material. It shouldn't be a huge surprise. All right, lastly, we go back to Film Noir number 12 box set. And I'll start with the previously hinted at Scott Brady film. This is Undertow. This is from 1949. And it's Scott Brady, and it stars John Russell, Dorothy Hart, Peggy Dow. I want to say that John Russell, I might be wrong about this, is the guy who plays Joe Burdette in Rio Bravo. He's like one of the villains, like the rich guy that he's trying to get his brother Claude Akins out of jail. Anyway, I saw him and I was like, why do I know that guy? I'm like, oh, that's Joe Burdette. I think that is John Russell, but I'm not actually sure. Brand new 2K master. This is cool because it's a William Castle noir, and I love that the Kino Noir box sets have emphasized lots of noir from lots of directors and made me aware of the fact that, you know, obviously William Castle, we knew had a career prior to his horror movies, but I didn't know them that well. And so now I've seen Johnny Stool Pigeon. I've seen this. I've seen some other noirs that he directed for, I want to say, both Columbia and Universal. And they're interesting. You know, he's a good filmmaker, and I really appreciate that. So brand new 2K master, best known for fright fare such as House on Haunted Hill, The Tingler, and Let's Kill Uncle. Cult director William Castle turns his lens on guns and gangsters for the film noir gem Undertow. Scott Brady, again, Lawrence Tierney's brother, stars as Tony Regan, a gambler just out of wartime military service. No longer interested in wages and speculations, Regan wants to open a mountain vacation lodge. And the opening scene is him giving like $3,000 to this old guy and his son for, you know, his investment, his part of their vacation lodge, which he now is making his business. Before this can take place, however, he goes back to, I'm going to stop this for a second. He goes back to Chicago to see his girl, who he wants to propose to, and, you know, get her in on this whole plan. But he's framed for murder and forced to go on the run from both the police and the unknown killers. Dorothy Hart and Peggy Dow play the love interests. There's a woman he meets at a casino in Reno, Nevada. That's where the movie starts. And they end up on the plane together. And then, of course, she finds out he's, you know, going to be married, and she's all sad. But she comes back into the movie because he needs help, and she's the only one that can help him. Let's see here. Love interest in the serpentine tale of mob and mall double crosses with John Russell, Bruce Bennett, and future star Rock Hudson in his second film appearance. Hudson shows up for like a minute, and I had to sort of double take. I'm like, is that him? Wow, crazy. But this is a good one. 71 minutes, lean and mean. And it's just, once it, you know, gets into murder framing thing happens really quickly, and in such a way that you're like, whoa, this is just totally veered away from what I thought was going to happen, and now we're into the full-on noir stuff. And Scott Brady is good in this, and I enjoyed him. And yeah, Castle's direction is solid, and this was a neat little discovery. This has an interview with Scott Brady's son, Tim Tierney, and Professor Film Scholar Jason A. Nye, which I would love to hear him talk about his dad and his dad's career, and maybe any recollections of this movie specifically. But regardless, it's neat to have someone related to the star of the film on the commentary. So that's Undertow. Then we have Outside the Wall. This is from 1950. And this one stars Richard Basehart, Dorothy Hart again, and Joseph Pevney is in this movie. Weird. Harry Morgan's in it. Interesting. Brand new 2K master Richard Basehart, He Walked by Night, stars as Larry Nelson, paroled from prison after serving nearly half of his 30-year sentence. Larry is determined not to fall into the clutches of the law again and takes a quiet job at a country sanitarium. There he meets and falls for a gold-digging nurse, Charlotte Maynard, that's Marilyn Maxwell, and he knows the only way to enter her web is to make a lot of fast money. So when Larry learns that the sanitarium is a front for a robbery syndicate, he soon finds himself a clay pigeon for the gang. Meanwhile, sweet and wholesome nurse Ann Taylor, Dorothy Hart, does her best to help Larry out of the unpleasant situation. Also starring Swedish sensation Signe Hasso. Outside the Wall is a classic noir of an ex-con's struggle to go straight. That's one of those stories that you hear. There's all kinds of noir templates. There's the detective stuff, the frame for murder, innocent guy, wrong man stuff like Undertow. Then you've got the just out of jail ex-con trying to go straight. That's one that's not as common, but you definitely see that story from time to time. I'm excited because this one has a commentary from Alan K. Rode, one of the great film noir experts, along with Eddie Muller and Imogen Sarah Smith, that, you know, when he does a commentary on something, that also perks up my interest in the movie itself, because I'm like, oh, if Alan's talking about this, it must be interesting. So I like Richard Basehart. I'm a big fan of He Walked by Night, and this sounds interesting. New 2K master for Outside the Wall from 1950. And then lastly, we have Hold Back Tomorrow with Cleo Moore and John Agar. Now, John Agar is interesting because I always think of him as a genre guy. He's in, you know, a bunch of 50s sci-fi movies. And I'm not surprised he's also in noirs, but I don't know of him as much in noir stuff. So this is from 1955, directed by Hugo Haas, written, produced, and directed by. I should know Hugo Haas, but for whatever reason, I'm not quite as aware of his filmography. And so I need to check this out. I'm just looking at some of his other features, and not too many of them ring a bell, so I need to dig into his stuff. Brand new 2K master, What strange law answered his last request? To bring this beautiful woman to his cell. Hollywood great John Agar stars... Oh, he was in Shield for Murder. Here's another noir. Stars as Joe, a death row inmate, with one final request before his impending hanging: to spend the night with a woman. The police bring him down, a down-on-her-luck former waitress, in quotes, named Dora, played by femme fatale extraordinaire Cleo Moore, on dangerous ground. At first, these two tormented souls meet with disdain, but soon they gain each other's respect. After a night of raw, unexpected passion, Joe informs Dora that with her love, he will not be afraid to die. The nihilistic noir two-hander, Hold Back Tomorrow, comes written, produced, and directed by Czech star and cult auteur Hugo Haas, The Girl on the Bridge, and Bait. Well, there you go. Czech auteur. But again, written and produced and directed by this guy, and a two-hander. So that's also an interesting thing when you have more of a smaller piece. This is a 75-minute movie. So decent length, but, you know, for two people in a cell, I'm curious. I'm definitely curious about this one. And again, curious to check out more Hugo Haas work. But anyway, so that is it for the box set of number 12. Yeah, definitely always be keeping an eye out for the Film Noir box sets, because they just have tons of stuff that I've never heard of, never seen, and they always signal me to go in and look at like what's been put into these sets, and what are these films about, and who's in them, and who's doing these commentaries. They just do a really nice job with these noir sets. So I want to take a second and say thank you to Kino for doing these noir sets, and I hope they do continue, even if it is to start bringing older noir titles and repackaging them, because I feel like these are great little sets. They go well together on the shelf, and they just have a lot of great stuff that a lot of people aren't talking about. So if you like film noir, you have to be checking out these box sets. Anyway, thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for listening, and I will talk to you soon. Bye-bye.